The world is ending. If you looked anywhere on the internet that had to do with football or soccer over the last 2 days, whether it was La Liga, the FA Cup, or the Premier League, the world was ending. And I was a contributing factor to that. I made a video called "The Game is Ruined." That video is all about the FA Cup semifinal between Coventry City and Manchester United, the offside heard round the world. And there were a lot of reactions to this, a lot of different people, to my video, to everything else that was happening. Obviously, the other video that's coming out today is going to have to do with Real Madrid, Barcelona. So don't worry, I'm going to talk about that. That's going to be a separate thing. But Coventry, Manchester United did highlight one thing for me that people seem to have a misunderstanding about. Because in this video where I was basically telling the story of the game and then getting up to the offside call that I absolutely hated, no, not just because it was in favor of Manchester United, as much as Manchester United fans want to play the victim in this situation. No, I just hated the call because I hate that call. Anywhere in the world, I'm going to hate that call, especially, obviously, in an FA Cup semifinal when the underdog is about to pull off an amazing upset. Yes, then I feel particularly robbed that call was made, but not because it was Manchester United. Now, the other thing that sparked hot debate in the comments was the fact that I called the penalty against Aaron Wan-Bissaka a stone-cold penalty. Now, it was very late in the game, obviously, to tie things, but it was one of those plays where a fullback is lunging, their arm is like this, right? And the cross hits them in the arm. And I'm going to smash any illusions people have about intent when it comes to the whole your arm being in the way idea here. That people somehow have convinced themselves that you have to intentionally smack the ball out of the air for it to be a handball. You don't. That has to be a penalty, right? And there was another instance of those that happened in a game between Nottingham Forest and Everton, which is what we're talking about today, all the different parts of that game. And there were 3 penalty shouts in the game for Nottingham Forest. None were given, but one of them was this same exact play that I consider a bona fide stone cold penalty, right? The one that was given against Aaron Wan-Bissaka, as it should have been, because and let me explain why. Let me explain why, just in case you're not an avid watcher of this channel and you didn't hear me yesterday talk about it. If you do not call a penalty for a fullback that has their hand like this, right? They're like this. If you don't call that a penalty, then you are incentivizing defensive players to close down crosses with their arms out because it's going to impede the ability to cross the ball, right? You are allowing them to use their arms to make themselves bigger to block a cross if you do not call the penalty, which is not, you're not supposed to be able to do that. This is a sport where you can't use your arms unless you play the one position that I played. So, suck it, losers. But it brings us to this match between Nottingham Forest and Everton, where the penalty I would consider a stone-cold penalty was not called. Here it is. A cross is coming in over the shoulder of Ashley Young, who's the Everton defender. A cross is played, and it hits Ashley Young right in the arm. I mean, it hits him right in the arm. Now, I try to understand the other side, right? So I watched this show called Ref Watch. It's like a 10-minute show uploaded by Sky Sports Premier League where some dude named Dermot basically just defends everything the referees do, which is good in this instance because I'd love to hear how a human being could watch this play and not call a penalty. And essentially what my boy Dermot said, and that is Dermot right here on the left. He looks exactly how you think he would look. What he said was that this would be a tough penalty to give because because it's a natural running position for his arm. Look, Dermot. Okay, let's watch this again. All right, we've got Ashley Young coming in. This is not a natural running position. All right, I ran a marathon last year. Never once did I look like this. Maybe on my way to celebrate at the finish line, like, yippee! I was never here. All right, this is a natural running position, right? He's coming towards the player. This is like exactly what you'd be afraid of. He makes himself bigger. You'd say, he's trying to swing his body to have a kick at the ball, but he's also just making himself a lot bigger with his arms here, right? In a certain point, intention does not matter. It's not supposed to matter, right? If you're getting your arm in the way of the ball and you're not making an effort to get your arm out of the way of the ball, right? That's just a penalty. It should be a penalty. it has to be a penalty, or else this is just going to be something that we're going to have to talk about forever, right? Because you're going to be trying to decipher the intent and like assess how long the person had to get their arm out of the way. It's going to be an absolute nightmare, right? And you're just going to be allowing defenders to get away with this sort of stuff all the time, right? It should, right? Because the way the game is officiated, okay, the way the game is officiated will dictate how the top players decide to play the game. And if you officiate the game in a way which allows defenders to make themselves bigger with their arms, they're going to do it because they're world-class players trying to win games. So this has to be a penalty. And Nottingham Forest rightfully freaked out after this happened because it was not the first penalty shout, but it's also not, in my opinion, well, there were two that were definitely penalties. So in order to spice up life, let's watch the one that I don't think was a penalty. And that would be the first penalty shout in this game. Because after the game, all hell broke loose. Nottingham Forest, whoever's running Nottingham Forest social media at least, lost their damn mind after this game. But you need to understand the context. You need to understand why. So here's the second play. So it's going to be a ball played into my boy, Gio Reyna. And he is going to get absolutely tapped from behind by Ashley Young here. Here comes the ball in towards Gio Reyna, and Ashley Young taps him in the back of the leg. I'm going to be honest. Dermot, my boy on this show, who I was just kind of clowning on earlier, he said that we need to get out of the perception that every slight bit of contact is a foul, or else we're going to live in a world where every time somebody gets touched in a box, we're going to end up with a penalty. I kind of agree with Dermot on that one. I think anybody with two brain cells to rub together that's watching this play will acknowledge the fact that there's basically no contact there. Gio Reyna, I love Gio. He's trying to ham this up absolutely as much as he can because that touch kind of got away from him because he was lunging to get to the ball in the first place. This feels a little Anthony Gordon-esque that he's throwing his foot in front of Ashley Young trying to make the clearance. It's not as obvious as Anthony Gordon's various efforts to win penalties over the last couple of months. But this would be a really harsh penalty. I am okay as somebody who is not a fan of either of these teams letting this one go, and I understand how you don't call it because it is such a little tap. You've already seen the second one, which is the handball, but now we go to the third one, which in my opinion is just as egregious as the handball. Okay, this is Ashley Young gets caught. I don't know how it ended up being Ashley Young all three times. He gets caught behind a player in on goal, and he just takes him down. I mean, you watch it from that angle and you're like, wow, that kind of looks like a penalty. And then you watch it from another angle and you're like, wow, that's definitely a penalty. So here's the other angle. This is slow-mo. I mean, he just knocks his legs out from under him. That's what happens there. That's crazy, right? Like, I don't know how in a world where we're living with VAR, we don't call that. And I want you to know, even my boy Dermot from the show agreed that this should have been a penalty. And Dermot would die on the hill for any one of these referees making these calls based off the comment section, which is basically just saying that Dermot's trying to protect his referee buddies. I don't think he's going that far because Dermot admits this third one's a penalty. And if Dermot can't explain to me why a referee crew is making this decision, then I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to say. Like, this just should have been a penalty, and then we move on with our lives. And that being the end point of this game. There were 3 penalty shouts. Everton ends up winning 2-0. This is a huge 6-pointer in the relegation battle that allows Everton to really take a giant step towards safety and put Nottingham Forest in a very precarious position. Nottingham Forest tweets this out basically right after the game. It says, 3 extremely poor decisions, 3 penalties not given, which we simply cannot accept. We warned the PGMOL that the VAR is a Luton fan before the game. Oh, shit. Well, they didn't charge him. Our patience has been tested multiple times. NFFC is now considering its options. This is an insane thing to tweet because the first time you read this, you go, oh, yeah, talk your stuff. Let them know. Let them know. And you appreciate the fact that a big club in the Premier League, right, is tweeting like some dude at a pub, just talking about the game. But the second time you read it, you start to realize why clubs don't tweet like this and why they tweet in incredibly canned ways. Because tweeting like this, you are questioning the integrity, like the actual integrity of the referee, and you're questioning the integrity of the league. Now, if you know anything about the way a league like the Premier League operates, there are very strict rules for the way that clubs are supposed to act. These are the rules that hold everything together, that prevent a league like the Premier League from ending up in a position like the Turkish league is in right now, where a club is literally trying to leave it, and there's, chaos is happening on a daily basis, it seems, in the Turkish league, with owners punching refs and stuff. That very strict code of conduct is enforced by a very well-paid army of lawyers, right, that are going to be combing over everything. And Nottingham Forest and the Premier League are already at odds. That is the important lore behind this story, because Nottingham Forest has already been suspended's the wrong word. They've been given a points deduction for violating financial fair play. And they are appealing that. They felt very hard done by the points deduction. I made a video about it at one point where Nottingham Forest was talking about how they felt like it was very unfair because they could have sold a player before the deadline, not the deadline day of the transfer window, but the deadline for the financial turnover, and then they would have been financially compliant, but they waited and got more money for the player closer to the actual transfer deadline, and as a result, they were adjudged to have run afoul of the FFP, right? It was a very harsh judgment in the eyes of Nottingham Forest, so they were already ready to go to war with the Premier League, and then they apparently make the Premier League aware of the fact that VAR is a Luton fan. Now, if you don't know what's going on in the Prem, Luton Town is in the relegation zone, but Nottingham Forest losing is very much in Luton Town's best interest because it gives Luton Town a way to get out, right? They're within 3 points of each other. Then if Luton Town gets out of the relegation zone, Nottingham Forest gets in it. So there's a ton of stress, ton of volatility involved in this. And Nottingham Forest apparently makes the Premier League aware of the fact that a Luton Town fan is the VAR official before the game. This tweet kicks everything off. This tweet has 175,000 likes and over 43 million views. Now, we know that's not right because X is like 3 people and a hamster running in a wheel, right? But somewhere in that neighborhood, somewhere between all the bots and everything else, right, this got a ton of traction and a ton of people were looking at it. And that's a problem for Nottingham Forest. And it's a huge problem for the Premier League because you now have one of the 20 clubs doing something that just really doesn't happen, questioning the integrity of the league out loud. This is like a fan tweet. Goldbridge would tweet this, right? Not the Nottingham Forest official account. So I was sitting here, like, I guarantee you the hammer is going to come down on Nottingham Forest at some point. And also, what does Nottingham Forest mean? Like, now considering all of its options, are they going to go full Fenerbahce and try and pull out of the Premier League? What are they going to try and do? Because they're already going to get fined for this tweet. Because they definitely, as part of being a part of the Premier League, agreed to bylaws that said you can't question the integrity of match officials. Right, which brings us to, I got to see which one was first, which was this statement from the Premier League communications account. The Premier League was extremely disappointed to read the comments made by Nottingham Forest on social media following its match against Everton. We note the FA has confirmed it will be investigating the club's statement. It is never appropriate to improperly question the integrity of match officials, and the nature of these comments means the Premier League will also be investigating the matter in relation to league rules. Boom. They know they've got him. Right, the Premier League spent a day coming up with a response. Obviously, you've got people like Stokey saying, how have you managed to make you seem like the victims? This is only happening because of your incompetent officials. More disappointed about the tweet than the state of officiating. Yeah, like, obviously the Premier League's going to get flamed here. But there's a difference between getting flamed on the internet and getting flamed legally. Because the Premier League's going to get flamed on the internet, but they are going to flame Nottingham Forest legally because you just can't do what Nottingham Forest did. You might want to, right? And look, I want to be very clear because somebody's going to be hearing this and be like, why is he defending the refs? I'm not. They suck. It's a terrible call. I just spent the first part of this video telling you how much of a terrible call it was. It's a terrible call. But I am a believer that it is incompetence instead of illicit activity or nefarious motives. I think they're just bad. I think that VAR is new. People don't know how to enforce the rules or what exactly to use VAR for. There's different applications of the rules happening just within the Premier League, let alone in other leagues around the world, right? I think the standard of officiating has just dropped a lot since VAR was introduced. They just don't know how to use it. It's new. But the problem the Premier League is going to go after is this right here. It is never appropriate to improperly question the integrity of match officials. Like, the Premier League is going to lose the Twitter war here, but they're going to win the legal one because they definitely have Nottingham Forest absolutely red-handed, threatening the Premier League and accusing the officials of not having integrity. Look, the evidence they have is that they missed 3 penalty calls. And I'm sorry, that's not evidence of a lack of integrity. It's just evidence that the officials, in my opinion, missed 2 very obvious penalty calls. And Nottingham Forest tweeted 19 minutes later because, as I joked about in the beginning, Nottingham Forest lawyers definitely got on this because Premier League's not the only people with lawyers. And this was an apology. It is not fully an apology, but it is the statement that Nottingham Forest should have made yesterday, but they made it today. Following yesterday's match at Everton, NFFC issued a statement highlighting our concern at the perception of the PGMOL appointment of VAR for the game. Also, you can totally tell the lawyers wrote this. Just listen to the words that are in this statement. It's hilarious. This was an issue we raised with PGMOL, as I like to call them, Puigmol, prior to the fixture because of the fear of the sideshow that would ensue if anything went wrong with officiating in the game. That fear is materialized as the correctness of 3 important decisions against the club have been called into doubt. The funny thing about this statement that the lawyers have crafted is they're like trying to distance themselves from a sideshow that I would say Nottingham Forest was 51% responsible for creating. Their tweet went triple platinum. Like, their tweet went uber viral because it was hilarious and angry, and I loved it, and I wish that sort of thing was allowed, but it's not, right? And I understand why the Premier League, if you agree to be a part of the Premier League, does not allow that sort of thing to happen because it would turn the entirety of Premier League officiating and the debates about it into a clown show, essentially. This is, which we're dangerously close to already. This is not about individuals. So boom, the moment I read that on stream, it was very clear that they were going to use distancing language here, but rather how the integrity of the game is seen. I still think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot here because they have done a lot of damage to how the integrity of the game is seen. We know match officials do not allow outside factors to influence their decision-making, and that all referees are required to declare their allegiances to Puigmol to avoid any perceived conflict or harm to the game's reputation for integrity. This whole paragraph will be affectionately dubbed the "please don't sue us" paragraph. Then this following paragraph right here is the "this is what we were trying to say" paragraph. And they do have a good point. However, it's clear that Puigmol must amend its rules on allegiances to account for contextual rivalries in the league table, not just local rivalries. This is currently not within the criteria, but should be. Mere reliance on match officials to recuse themselves if contextual rivalries exist invites conjecture, as some have recused themselves where others have not. NFFC stands by its request for greater transparency. Was that what that tweet was? A request for greater transparency? All right. Around Puigmol appointments to further protect the game's reputation as intended in Puigmol's existing approach to allegiances. Given the widespread and ongoing concerns, not merely of the fans, players, and managers of this club, but of many others and the pundits too, over VAR decisions throughout this season, any move which boosts confidence in the system should be properly considered. That's the tweet they should have sent out yesterday. Right, that outside of obviously addressing the statement that they dropped, but they're using words like mirror and contextual rivalries and recused themselves. I mean, this might as well be a legal proceeding over Twitter at this point. This is a world-class lawyer statement. Nottingham Forest trying to distance themselves, saying that, look, we were just the mouthpiece for this giant circus that kicked off. When in reality, while the fans were all upset about it, I didn't really hear about this until the Nottingham Forest tweet. That is what blew this thing all the way up. I had people tagging me in it all over the place. The bottom line is, there's a reason clubs can't tweet like that. The Premier League is definitely going to try and drag Nottingham Forest through the mud for it. Nottingham Forest today became sentient again and became aware of that fact, right? I'm not saying they're going to get a points deduction. They're probably going to get fined or something. Something is going to happen to Nottingham Forest because of the way that they tweeted. I think the most important thing to consider here is that the refs are just bad. And the problem is the Premier League can't come out and say that the refs are bad because then it's just going to keep making it worse. They have to, the Premier League's like the manager and the refs are the players, right? You can't, unless you're Jose Mourinho or Antonio Conte, I guess, you can't come out and say that your players all suck. And not all the referees suck. Being a referee is a really hard job, but they've made some terrible calls. I mean, 2 of those 3 those are penalties, right? And that could change the fortune of clubs. I mean, that's a 2-point swing right there, right? It's a six. I mean, that's a 6-pointer. And you're talking about the difference between if they get both those penalties, it's a draw, right? And if you don't call them, or maybe you call the third one. I think if you call the first one a penalty, the only one that I don't think was stone cold penalty, I don't think anybody can argue about it too much. You'd be like, oh, that's a little soft, but it's not like VAR would ever be able to go in and reverse that call. He taps him in the back of the foot. I mean, if Gio Reyna is able to feel that and get to the ball first and go down, he does get tapped to the back of the foot. And it's hard to argue with that being a foul inside the box. And say all three of those are given. I mean, you're talking about a match that's 3-2. At least, you have no idea what else would happen after those penalties are given. Everything could change, but that's a huge, huge time to miss it. But it's also the brutal part of sports, right? There is always going to be some terrible officiating call that haunts you forever if you're the fan of a team. And it seems like no matter how much technology you introduce, there's no way to avoid that. The solution to this situation in the short term is the Premier League has to be more transparent about the way it's interpreting rules. Various leagues that are in the U.S. have different approaches to this. The NBA publishes reports on every foul call in the last couple minutes of a game, or foul calls that determine the outcome of a game. They release reports on that, and they will literally say whether the officials got it right or wrong. I think something like that would actually help in the Premier League, not in the sense that you'd be able to go back and replay the game, but just to let people know that you are, as a league, aware of the fact that you have a problem. I think the reason that this is all boiling over, not just from the fans, but from literal clubs, is that there has been an inconsistency in the way things are called, a lot of confusion in the way rules are applied, and that's just led to people having to try and figure out what is a penalty and what is not a penalty, basically. Or what is a handball and what is not a handball. How exact are the lines for offside and everything else. Everybody feels like it's learning together instead of the Premier League or any other league leading from the front, right? That's just not happening. And as a result, you end up with things boiling over like this because, as I talked about earlier in this video, the tensions could not be higher for Nottingham Forest and Everton. But Nottingham Forest has been screwed here. Nottingham Forest has been screwed, and unfortunately, because of how airtight all of these league rules are when it comes to questioning officials' authority and integrity and whatever, they're probably going to get screwed again, right? They're going to be out a little bit of money. So a tough day to be the social media manager for Nottingham Forest, but this, out of all of the things, was the second most wild thing that happened on Sunday, because there was another one, and that was Barcelona-Real Madrid, but that's a whole other video.